What would you say lacks in economic research in general?
You mean in the field of economics? What are we lacking?
Yeah, yeah. What should we focus on in the future?
Well, there's a lot. Maybe I'll focus on the type of stuff that I'm interested in. This is a podcast, to some degree related to religion, so we can talk about that. So we've come to know a lot more in the last decade on the role that this is really something that this research has blossomed in the last, like, say, 10, 15 years, on the role that religion has played historically in developing economies and in the 20th and 21st centuries as well. What we know a lot less about from the economic, or at least not just economics and social sciences, is say the role that non-Abrahamic faiths have played. So, outside of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, we it's something that's clear. Hinduism, for instance, is a religion subscribed to by over 1 billion people. Yet we know very little, except for some studies on the caste system, its role in economic development. We know very little about the role that Buddhism has played in the economic development of East Asia, or lack thereof. This is something where religion, I think all religions, just like almost all cultural features, typically have both positive and negative economic consequences. But it's really about spelling out what those are. I would say for younger people that might be interested in going into economics, I think there's a lot to be done in introducing people to the fact that these are not two distinct concepts. That at the undergraduate level, and certainly then at the graduate level, that these are the types of questions that are really central to the study of economics, I think. Even though they're not currently in in the academic field of economics, the economics of religion is still a relatively small field, even though it's really growing. That I, and because of that, because it's something that, it was quote unquote founded in the early 90s. One of my colleagues at Chapman University, Larry Onaconee, is one of the founders, really started applying economic insights to religion. And he was more or less almost the only one doing it for about 10 to 15 years, but something that since the early 2000s, so about 20 years now, people have really started to pick up as something that's central. But that also means that there's a lot of questions that are unanswered, even among the Abrahamic faiths.
Because of how new the research field is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and there's just so many questions, because religion is so pervasive in all societies, that even among the faiths that have been studied a lot, like particularly
There's so
Christian,
much.
Jewish, and Islamic societies, there's still a lot of questions that we just don't know the answer to. That I think there'll be that we'll know a lot more. If we were to do this podcast again in 10 years, that the answer to this question might be a little different, because I think we're seeing so much research come out in this field right now.
Yeah, that's a really cool point. And also, like, I think related not necessarily to like economics and religion, but social economics has also like blown up recently. And that's like honestly like I hadn't talked to this with Dr. Goldstone as we had said, but like the research I'm conducting now is social economic research, which isn't necessarily linked with religion, but kind of just like social behaviors and how the economy affects that and how they affect like
Yeah.
their own kind of set of like behaviors, social behaviors creating like an objective pattern, which is kind of like what this is doing.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I think that what you're kind of describing is similar to what we call cultural economics. So, looking at the role that cultures play, or kind of these agreed upon, or not even implicitly agreed upon norms that societies have and how they affect economic development. This is something that is also, it's obviously related to religion. I would consider religion to kind of be a subset of culture in a way. But more broadly, cultural economics has really taken off, and that's been a little bit more so in the last 25-ish years, as something that economists are increasingly seeing the role that culture, you cannot understand a lot of economic phenomena without understanding the differences in cultures across societies and the impact that they have on decision making.
Yeah, yeah, it's like it's like more realistic economics, I feel, because like today, during this year, my junior year, like I've taken like AP macro and microeconomics, and like sure, like the concepts and the pillars are very interesting, but a lot of those concepts don't hold up under the irregularities of our world. I mean, like there are people who base their religions off of non-objective factors. They don't work in the best ways that should work for them in terms of like utils or objective matters, and rather like there are these things that we need to gauge, but we don't like or are increasingly doing, like religion and how those influence factors and how that leads to decisions that otherwise are not necessarily covered by the fundamental courses of economics.
Well, because I
Yeah,
mean, we're not. Oh, sorry. Uh,
go
because I
ahead.
mean, we're not robots. We have human nature, which is influenced by culture, and that's why it's never an exact science when it comes to anything social. And I guess
It's
the more
true.
we understand those social phenomena, the more we can, I guess, attempt to make it into an exact science. I don't think we'll ever be able to, but at least we can get closer.
Yeah, and it's not an exact science, and I don't think it was ever meant to be. You know, I don't think social sciences are. You know, that's the I think the interesting thing about social science relative to the hard sciences really is that it is something that people are unique, and people are there's no laws really, and there is a law of demand, say, but it's really something that even that can be broken, right? Demand
Higher
curves
law of
can
weighting.
slope upward under weird circumstances. But no, I mean, I think that yeah, I mean, I think this is right, and and this is, but this doesn't also mean that we should throw out the economic way of thinking, because we can think about culture as we can use our economic models as as baselines and think, all right, well, why do they work differently in different societies, and that's where we can then ascribe culture as maybe affecting tastes, which would be something you would certainly go over in principles of microclass, or
Yeah,
thinking
it's a
why these
fundamental
cultures
shifter of
evolve over
demand.
time. I mean, yeah, so it's something that we do have to have a conception of what culture is and how it evolves. And economists do have thoughts on this. There's a very famous set of models that look at how culture evolves over time from an economic perspective and what that might mean. So yeah, I mean, I think that again, we're kind of we're re-understanding. This was something that if you look at the early 20th century, most many people studying economics would have thought that culture played a big role in the disparities in economic development across the world. But the reason that it became
It's the
something
Lorenz
that
curve.
no, not even that. It's more that it was more actually people like Weber who I would say were very Eurocentric in the way that, or yeah, at best, and probably racist at worst, and saying it was just something about European culture that was better for economic development, and and there might have been aspects, I mean, of things that happened in Europe that might have led to economic development, but but economists, I think, rightfully shied away from those types of theories throughout the course of the 20th century. But the pendulum kind of swung too far to the point where,
It's
and this
treated
might have
like
been what you studied in your micro classes, where, we just are maximizing over some utility function,
yeah.
and everything can be explained by that, where no, I mean, we have culture, we have this way of perceiving the world that is not, it's not even necessarily individual. The culture works at a society level, but it's also does clearly impact the way that we think. So these two things are not mutually exclusive. We can still use the basic models of economics, we just have to do it carefully.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like it's not. I'm not necessarily saying that they don't obey the laws of economics. It's more like when you look at like the shifters of demand and you think of taste, you more think of like the typical like, oh, this is becoming more popular because of a magazine cover that advertised such and such. But if it's more just
Yeah,
a religious taste that also has an influence, and that's kind of like what are you saying? Like we need to study more of,
yeah,
and like its its emphasis on
possibly.
the
Yeah, I
fundamentals of
mean, yeah, I mean, that can be the type of thing that is certainly studied, and we certainly would need to know more to get at kind of the underlying kind of cultural values that lead to, if you want to talk about, say, demand for goods or things like that. Sure, I mean, that's something that we need to know much more about, I think.
yeah.